Hi everyone, Belinda Kelly, John Fitzgerald's Executive Assistant here. I'd like to welcome you all to tonight's focus call on Australia's most alarming issue. It's great to have you on here, thanks for coming. We love questions, so please feel free to email me directly so I can get you an answer from John himself as quickly as possible. I'm contactable on belindak@jlf.com.au, otherwise we do receive emails to info@jlf.com.au as well. All right, so let's get up and running tonight. John Fitzgerald, everyone, thanks.
Hey guys, and welcome. April 30, 2014. I always think when I say that, wow, April 30 already. You know, it was just yesterday that it was the New Year's Eve, 2013, 2012. Time goes so quickly, and that's very, very relevant for so many reasons, but particularly in relation to planning and success. The biggest issue facing Australia today is in the news almost every day, and it's highlighted by Tony Abbott in the budget. We simply can't afford the pension. And I was listening to him on radio this morning saying, we're not going to adjust the pension in this term, but yes, it has to be adjusted. There has to be adjustments made. And the reason is, it's simple mathematics and simple numbers, and I always say there's only ever truth in numbers. When they started the pension way back, nearly 100 years ago, there were 18 taxpayers per one pensioner. In the next 10 to 15 years, get this, there will be 1.5 taxpayers per pensioner. Mathematically, it simply doesn't work. It simply doesn't work. And that's why the government put in place massive superannuation where you're going to have 9% growing to 12% of your income going to superannuation, but it just doesn't cut it. And the reason is because the average person retiring in 2020 will have around $200,000 in super. There's 2 points I want to make about this. Number one is you have to do something about it yourself, but you have to do something about it now, because you've only got a limited window of time. And statistics tell us that your peak earning period is between the ages of 45 and 50. And if you're not yet 45, then that hump's going to come. And if you're 45 to 50, you're in that zone. And if you're over that hump, you've had your peak earning years. If you've got 10 years left of earning capacity, let's just work out the numbers on that. Let's say you're earning $100,000 and paying $30,000 a year in tax. You'll pay $300,000 a year in tax. You'll have 26 pay cycles times 10. You've got 260 pay cycles. It's a limited amount if you've got 10 years. Now, as you know, they're saying they're going to adjust the pension age from 65 to 70, so they're pushing that out. Well, that's easy to say, but how many 65-year-olds can actually get a job? And how do they get a job? How do they get a job? How employable are they? Now, these are important points, and they're important points from a mathematical perspective. So point number one is, it's so important for you to sit down and actually do the maths yourself. The second most important thing is just the culture of Australia. We're not a culture of wealth builders, and therefore we have not enough people leading by example. And the point I want to make on that is, you have to be the person leading by example. We need you to be an example. 1% of Australians will retire on an income at or above the median wage. 1%. And let's assume it's 5%. Let's assume by a miracle that increases. Still, we have a culture where 95% won't. Now, why don't they? It comes down to really one key point, and that is we don't know how to invest our money. We think to make money we need to work harder. You don't realise, and we all don't realise, that the harder you work, the more tax you pay. It doesn't help you. And let's go back to the maths on how you would make enough money to retire on an income of say $50,000. If you wanted to, the average wage today is $75,000. If you wanted to retire on an income of $50,000, you would need to have $1 million in the bank, plus you would need to own your own home. Now here's how hard that is. For you to make $1 million, let's say you started with $100,000 and you got a 10% return, which, by the way, there is no investment for the last 30 years that has offered you a 10% return other than residential property. I'll get to that in a minute. Other than residential property, which is 12.7%. But if you were to get a 10% return and you put $100,000, that would turn into $800,000 in 21 years. Mathematically. How does that happen? A thing called the rule of 72, which means you divide your 10% by 72, so every 7.2 years your money doubles in value. But, as you know, if you're earning 10% on your money, and it's cash, and a cash dividend, you have to pay tax on that. So the truth is, your net earnings will be closer to 6%, and that's another reason for property. The point of the maths I'm trying to get through to you is that if you have $100,000, and if you get 10%, which you haven't been able to do, in 20 years, the most you're going to get is $800,000, and you're still not going to be able to go anywhere near the median wage. Now, this is simple maths. So then we say, well, how do you build wealth? We've got to have a formula that combines three things. It's worth making notes on this. You need growth, you need income, and you need leverage. And with growth, income, and leverage, you can get compound growth. And that's where I can show you that by just getting 8% growth per annum, you can turn $100,000 into $3 million in 12 years. $100,000 into $3 million. And that's why Warren Buffett calls compound growth a financial miracle. But you need those three things working for you. Now, Australians have no idea about that. And even if I talk to them about it, oh, that's too complicated. I don't like numbers. I don't like maths. But it really is our responsibility to just dig in to understand it. And I really want to explain that to you. I really want to put a strategy in place for you just on that. Because I promise you, there's no other way. And test it. Ask a financial planner how to turn $100,000 into $3 million. He'll tell you it's impossible. Tell you it can't be done. I can tell you not only how to do it, I can show you people who have actually done it. I can actually give you case studies. And yes, I'm talking about residential property, a business I've been in for 30 years, and of course I believe in it. Of course I believe in it. It's the best tool and the best data. The best data. There's nothing that performs better than residential property over the last 30 years with 12.7% annual growth. 12.7% annual growth and income, I should say, annual returns. Let me go to the next point, though, which is probably the most important point I can make. And that is, we need a strategy that's going to enable us to build wealth. We need a strategy, though, that is time-tested. Time-tested. And therefore, we need to look at what asset class we can invest in. Now, here is where residential property is so dominant today. It's so dominant today because if I go back for the last 30 years, and I can give you data going really right back to 1960, but specifically the last 30 years, I can show you residential property doubling every 7 to 10 years, thereabouts. but showing an average return of 12.7%. I can show you how to leverage, I can show you how to get income, and more importantly, a surety of income. So you know you're going to get income. But on top of that, you have the added benefit of tax deductions. And that's a real added benefit when it comes to residential property. But here's the real, I suppose the real important data. And that is today, we see a cycle in the residential market that has just started, and that if history is any sort of pointer, will ensure that residential property prices will double in the next 5 to 6 years. Now, I really want you to hear me out on this. We've been in a downturn since 2003-4. Well, not so much a downturn, but residential property hasn't been escalating since 2003-4. And I'll use the Sydney median house prices as the benchmark. In 1998, the Sydney median house price was circa $260,000. By 2003, that had reached $520,000, so it had doubled in that 5-year period. 2011, 8 years later, it was still $575,000. It had hardly gone up. Now, it's around $750,000. So in 3 years, it's gone up from $575,000 to $750,000 with a bullet. The median house price in Sydney went up 15.6% in the last 12 months. But in the last quarter, it was 4.4%, and just in the last month, it was 2.8%. Now, what does that tell me? It tells me for the quarter, it's trending at around 17.5%, which is over its annual average, but for the month, it's trending at nearly 30% growth. That is exciting. I have to go right back to 2001 to find months and consecutive quarters like that. It really is a momentous occasion. But it's not isolated, because I can look at Sydney, but then I also look at Brisbane. Brisbane for the month of March jumped by 2.9%. If I annualise that growth, that's over 30% per annum. They're phenomenal figures, really phenomenal figures. Melbourne, for the quarter, topped the whole of Australia with 5.6%. So that's trending on a quarterly average of over 20% per annum. Now, guys, if you get 10% growth in a property, you're making $50,000. I can show you how to buy a property using just $100,000 of equity. What does that mean? It means that if you get 10% growth in your property, you've had a return on your equity of 50% per annum. 50%. They might say, these are just fairy tale numbers, aren't they, John? No, guys, I can prove this to you. I can show you. This is what I've been doing for 30 years. This is what I wrote about in 7 Steps. 7 Steps has sold over 120,000 copies. People have been using it to build wealth. We've got hundreds and literally hundreds and hundreds of custodians who are multi-millionaires. But it's just so prevalent today when in the news you've got the government, Tony Abbott, on the news today saying, guys, we're not going to tinker with the pension in this term, but yes, there has to be adjustments made. And we are going to push the pension age from 65. It's just not affordable, and you have to do something about it. And what I'm saying to you is, it comes down to mathematics. And the only way anyone can show you how to make $1 million or $2 million or turn your $100,000 into real wealth is through leverage, income and growth, and therefore the asset class is residential property, but it's very specific residential property. And when I say very specific, I'm talking about you must have a land content of 40%. So you can't be in a city, you can't be buying units, it must be dwellings, must be houses, detached houses, proximity to schools, location, etc., etc., etc. But it also comes down to your borrowing capacity and your ability to duplicate. I really want you to investigate this for yourself. It's so important. And just ask yourself now, say to yourself, how old am I today? 45. Retire when I'm 65. Okay, let's say I retire when I'm 70. I've got 25 years. I'm earning $100,000. Okay, that's 2.5 million. Let's say it's 3 million in income. I'm going to pay 1 million of that at least in tax. How about rediverting that tax into residential property? How about using 100,000 of equity to try and get a 50% return? Because that's what you would have gotten if you had have invested in property in Sydney last year. And we've got 394 clients who bought properties in Sydney the last couple of years at an average of around about 440,000. Those properties now comparably are 550 to 600,000. Massive goal their way. Now they're duplicating. They're using that to duplicate, so they're getting compound growth. This is the biggest issue in Australia today, but it's the biggest issue because it's right in front of you. New Zealand had just announced, or previously 6 months ago, they cannot guarantee the pension to people born after 1963. I believe we are going to have to make an announcement that they cannot guarantee the pension to anyone born after 1968, and it could be 1963. Mathematically, we just can't afford it, but it's up to you and all of us, people on this call, to make this difference, because unfortunately we don't have the culture. Unfortunately, if you go to 10 Australians, 10 of your friends, and say, hey, what about this pension? What are you going to do about it? You're going to get a vacant look, and you're going to get an I don't know. And they're not going to do anything about it. Unfortunately, that's our culture, that's our heritage, and we need to change it. And it's the biggest issue facing Australia today. It really is, because we don't want to leave our kids with this issue, this legacy, and really get back to the maths on it. Even if you get a 10% return, there's nothing you can show me that's going to give you 10% income without tax. Then I'm going to turn 100,000 in 20 years into 800,000. I can show you how to turn that 100,000 into 3 million. I want to work on a strategy with you. And really, when it comes down to it, as I say to everybody when I talk to, if you want to build wealth, first and foremost, you need a strategy proven by mathematical data. A strategy proven by mathematical data, and I'd be happy to work on that with you. So please take that away tonight. And when you listen to the politics talk about the budget, and they're talking about tightening, they're talking about having to cramp back, it's all about affording the pension. It's all about the fact that we've got our baby boomers retiring, which is 25% of our workforce in the next 10, 15 years, and therefore we've got more people retiring than we've ever had before, and less taxpayers. Mathematically, it doesn't work, and I heard Tony Abbott say it today, on the radio today. So it's in the newspapers, and that's what it's talking about. It's talking about your future. So now is the time for you to do something about it. It really is the most important issue facing Australia today. But let me finish with probably the brightest news. We have the biggest housing boom I've ever seen in my lifetime. And why is it the biggest housing boom I've ever seen in my lifetime? Because Australia's population is growing by 400,000. We've never seen that before. For the last 3-4 decades that I've got data, our average population growth was around 200,000. So it's double that, and it needs to increase. We've got massive population growth. We've got a shortage of housing. And at the same time, we've got external buyers entering the market, being Chinese and self-managed super funds, that are driving up the prices of housing. It really is an amazing time, and it only takes you to look at Sydney, what's done in the last 12 months, 15.6% growth, and now that's spreading to Melbourne, spreading to Brisbane, and it'll spread all around the country. And I've got so many clients now that started with me in 1998, 99, 2000, and between 2000 and 2003, the market doubled in value on the main East Coast. Most people who bought houses for around 150 to 200,000, they went to 300 to 400,000 dollars. They doubled their money. A lot of them duplicated, got compound growth, and made $1 million in that short cycle. That short cycle lasted for, let's say, 4 or 5 years. And you can do that now, but really, time is of the essence. Key for you is just the mathematics. Growth, income, and leverage, but it's got to be supported and dominated by your borrowing capacity. So sit down with our consultants and ask them for really two things. Get the empirical data. Empirical data is the median house price data and the population growth going back for the last 30, 40 years. Look at it for yourself. Then do the maths using the rule of 72. If you're not sure what I'm talking about, ask the guys about it. Do the maths on that. And then most importantly, sit down and work out what equity you've got, and then assume you could get 10%. How could you possibly, in 10, 20, 30 years, or whenever you're going to retire, get to a stage of having a minimum amount of wealth? And then look at the opportunity that I can provide you in the next 5, 6, 7 years with this cycle of making $1, $2, $3 million, getting a 50% return on your money. And I'm talking specifically, I won't name the client, but a specific client of mine from Melbourne who bought a house in Sydney. He paid $440,000, just got it valued for $550,000. He put no equity into that house. He used equity he put no cash into that house. He used equity from his own home. Let's assume that was $100,000, which he had in his own home from Melbourne. He's made $110,000 in 1 year. $110,000 in 1 year on $100,000 equity is, guess what, 110% return. Now, this isn't voodoo magic. This is simply a formula that I have used and that wealthy people use and that Warren Buffett uses. We call it the formula to get leverage, income growth, to give you compound growth. Please investigate this. Please investigate it and open your ears up to the news and ask yourself, okay, what am I doing about it? Because no one else is going to do it for you. Email us, info@jlf.com.au, custodian, speak to your consultants. Write to me. John, what do I do? How do I do it? Let's get the communication going. Ask the questions. Let us work it out. Let us sit down. Let us work out a strategy for you. That's what we're here for. That's what Custodian has been doing for the last 15, 16 years. And that's what I've been doing for the last 30 years. That's what I wrote the book on, 7 Steps to Wealth. We've got over 6,000 people who bought properties off us, and we've got many, many hundreds of those who have 4, 5, 6 properties who are multi-millionaires. We've got a cycle now. It's very, very exciting. And I'm just talking about, even if I just talk about the last 3 months' data, the last month, Sydney, that is March, Sydney and Brisbane tracking at nearly 30%, but the last quarter, Melbourne at over 20% growth per annum. These are astounding numbers. Get involved urgently, particularly while the interest rates are the lowest you've ever seen in Australian history. I'm very passionate about it, particularly when I hear Tony Abbott on the radio this morning talking about the budget and how we have to roll up our sleeves and how we can't afford the pension. But guys, it's not politics, it's us having to do something about it. So let's do something about it. Get onto it right now and start with the maths on it. Have a great evening, everybody. April 30, 2014. Start the 1st of May. Make the call. Sit down with our guys. Get the communication going with me through them. They'll write to me. Send me your details. I'll write back. I'm happy to do it. I want to help every Australian build wealth. Why? Because I realise that's what we need to do. We need to change the culture. But it starts with you. Have a fantastic evening, everyone. Good evening.